emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 565.PR1121, certificate number 26004. Hands Across America.
I know you're a fan of the supergroup.
I love all supergroups.
What's your favorite supergroup?
Traveling Wilburys.
Wow.
That's like a non-ironic answer.
It was right there.
I do love the Traveling Wilburys.
I also love the Traveling Wilburys.
I mean, you can't. There's no other supergroup that has a Beatle and Bob Dylan.
Right.
Like if your least famous guy is the frontman of ELO, that's a pretty good supergroup.
It's a pretty good supergroup. And, you know, the Traveling Wilburys are from roughly this same era that we're going to discuss today in the show. I know that you and I have both felt a little bit shy about entering too many entries into the Omnibus from our heyday of the mid to late 80s.
I think you're a little less shy than me.
I'm
Mr. Trapper Keeper.
I started in the middle of the 70s and worked
Tootsie
my way.
Pop licking.
But it did seem like a very fertile time in American and world history that some of those things should not be forgotten by the future.
Do you have other supergroups you want to put up against the Traveling Wilburys? Are you going to stick up for Asia?
No, the thing is, I'm a Traveling Wilburys booster myself, but there are some supergroups that undeniably are maybe not more super than a Beatle and a Dylan. But some supergroups that actually include a Dylan,
like USA for Africa,
like USA for Africa.
Does that count?
Well, I mean, it was a supergroup. It did have a big international hit.
I feel like you have to have a full record. You can't just have one single like USA for Africa did.
Well, in fact, USA for Africa was a full record.
Wait,
they put out a.
But is it just them talking as they're filing in? Oh, Phil Collins is here. Phil, get over here.
No, the USA for Africa LP was a gatefold LP.
But does it have more than one song?
It does.
Does it have "We Are the World" in Spanish on the back?
It does. Here's a little selection of the track list. The first song, of course, is "We Are the World."
I love that one.
The famous one.
Always start off with the single.
But then the second song is by Steve Perry of Journey. It's called "If Only for the Moment."
Wait, and they all stood around and sang all these other songs?
No. What it was that that a lot of the participants on the USA for Africa, collective supergroup, then added songs like unreleased songs. To flesh out the record. It's like one of those
90s charity records. Yeah. It's like Red, White, and Famine.
The Pointer Sisters are on there. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band.
This is not a supergroup. That doesn't count.
There was a group called Northern Lights, which was a sub-supergroup just of the Canadians. So
of USA for Africa?
Yeah. So
is Dan Aykroyd on it?
Aldo Nova is there. Bryan Adams. Anne Murray?
If Dan Aykroyd is not on this, I don't care.
I'm looking. I don't see. Oh, wait. Eugene Levy is there. Geddy Lee.
But Eugene Levy wasn't on We Are the World.
No, this is
I would love to hear his solo, though.
The Northern Lights are a separate group. Neil Young appears, so it truly is a super group. Then Prince and the Revolution submitted a tune. Chicago, Tina Turner. I mean, this is a big album. Huey Lewis.
To me, this does not count as a supergroup. This is a collection. This is this is the White Album, basically. Right. They didn't even record them together.
But this supergroup album even has a sub-supergroup.
That's pretty good.
On it. So that's kind of a big deal.
It's true. There's no supergroup within. Well, I mean, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young has a supergroup within it. Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there a sub-Temple of the Dog? Is there like an Emerson and Lake record?
I don't think so. Although, wait a minute. We have seen a couple of those, right? Super groups that morph into different kinds of supergroups. Like, what about when Queen had Paul Rogers as the singer?
But they just say they're Queen with Paul Rogers.
Yeah, that's right. I guess it's not a supergroup.
It kind of is. I mean, a supergroup is just any group where the people come from other groups. But
we're judging the supergroups according to how super they are.
Also, all these examples are like 30 years old. Have there been no supergroups since Temple of the Dog?
What was the last supergroup? I mean, the thing is, there could be a supergroup. Now it's just
featuring, right? Yeah. You don't need that anymore.
There could be a supergroup of K-pop artists, and I don't know that I would be aware of it. Looking at the latest Coachella lineup, it could all be one band. The only band I recognize is Rage Against the Machine. The rest of it could just be a supergroup. They could all be performing together.
I just found out my son wants to go to Coachella because he loves Frank Ocean so much.
Really?
And I said, "That's great. I will let you go." And he was like, "Will you buy me a ticket?" And I said, "No, you got to get yourself to Coachella."
Dog.
I don't understand why he thinks I need to finance his bad idea.
He's still living under your roof. He's still technically your...
He gets room, board, and Coachella. That's the...
Well, so now how do you rate, going back to the mid-'80s, Futurelings should understand that this was that there are supergroups like Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young whose only purpose was to make protest music and earn money for themselves. But
it's a very, very harsh take on this seminal folk group.
And I mean, honestly, that's true of the Traveling Wilburys too. They were just friends sitting around having a good time.
It's also true of every rock group that has tried to sell records,
except for this brief fashion in the mid '80s, where musicians came together to donate their time and talent for a good cause, and sort of the real trailblazers here were a group of British super musicians, British and Irish musicians.
It's all Bob Geldof's fault.
Who formed a group called Band Aid at the behest of Bob Geldof and Midge Ure from the band Ultravox. Midge doesn't get as much of the credit as Bob Geldof does, although Midge produced the thing and was certainly like a big part of it. It's funny that Bob Geldof gets all the credit. There are some people that claim that Bob's then girlfriend, Paula Yates, who went on to be Michael Hutchinson's squeeze lady, muse.
Yeah, she.
Paula Yates was some said the brains behind the operation.
Is that right?
Yeah, that she came up with the idea.
If I remember right, she had just died the first time I was ever in the UK.
How many times did she die after that?
It was the first time she had died, and the first time I was in the UK. She dies every time I go back. No, but the tabloids were everywhere talking about this poor orphaned girl. Whatever Hutchinson, Paula Yates' daughter was named, Tiger Lily Lulani,
right? Who had lost it all,
Yates or whatever,
right? And she died of OD.
Is that true?
Yeah, not Tiger Lily, Paula Yates died of OD.
And so the headlines were, and I had no idea who Paula Yates was, and it really was like, you're in a foreign country. Just because they're speaking English doesn't mean you know the celebrities. There are 100 presenters could die tomorrow that you would never have heard of, and it would be front page news here. I kind of assumed it was just like Canada. They just had all our celebrities.
She had a hit. She covered These Boots Are Made for Walking and was on the charts in 1982.
The U.S. charts?
No.
No,
No. But she is a person that was famous in Britain and overseas territories.
Yes. No, she was legitimately famous, but I just could not believe it. To me, it seemed like Princess Di level mourning for someone I had never heard of.
Yeah, and I feel like this whole like Geldof Hutchins Yates love triangle was also kind of a tabloid scandal in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, there's these people that are only famous in tabloids. And if you're in America, you know ours, but you just don't know theirs.
The thing is, Bob Geldof, if you put Bob Geldof and Michael Hutchence up against a wall and said, pick the more sexy one, I think you're going to choose Michael Hutchence 10 out of 10 times. So I do feel like it was a trade up if sexiness is what you're after. Michael Hutchence never put together a supergroup that sent famine relief to Africa, but he definitely was a better dancer, I'm going to say.
Yes.
He also...
Those are not equivalent accomplishments.
Well, I don't know. It depends. I mean, I rate dancing pretty highly.
He's Geldof apparently is better at kink management as well, since he's still alive.
Right. Well, that whole business of Michael Hutchence having died of autoerotic asphyxiation, I don't think that's in the coroner's report.
I think you've told me this before. I always assumed it was true.
I
believe everything I see in Paula Yates headlines.
There's a lot of, the coroner's verdict was suicide. It's Paula Yates that refused to accept that verdict.
Because when you were saying, if you put Michael Hutchence up against a wall, my first thought is, well, he'd probably be into that. I guess I've been unfairly believing the Paula Yates version of history. So yeah, Band-Aid. Do they know it's Christmas?
Yeah. Right. So Geldof was living in the UK as a United Kingdom resident. Although Geldof's
he's Irish born,
yeah. Actually, he's born in Wales. Oh no, that's Paula Yates. She's Welsh, so that's some.
There's a lot going on here.
There really is, and an
Irishman, a Welshman, and an
Australian
Englishman walk into a threesome.
Yeah.
Australian.
This was a time during which the sort of famine conditions in Ethiopia were like a very topical news item, and in the UK press in particular, there was a lot of reportage happening on a sort of series of famines in Ethiopia that happened over the course of several years, and those famines were part of and a component of, and in some large measure, a result of a revolution that was happening within Ethiopia from, well, really starting in the 60s, but a revolution that sort of was a set of cascading revolutions that happened from the deposition, not deposition. What is the form of depose?
What, when Haile Selassie got smothered with a pillow?
Yeah, is it deposition?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Deposal? Deposing? Deposement?
Deposement.
These all sound like 90s R&B groups.
They do.
I love deposement.
Up until 1975, the Emperor Haile Selassie, who you might have heard of already because he is Jah Rastafari.
I'm sure he's worshipped in the future.
Just as well as he is now. Mm-hmm. But Haile Selassie was the emperor of Ethiopia for decades, and gradually lost his control over Ethiopia. He ruled sort of autocratically, and Haile Selassie was a member of the Amhara people, and there are a lot of different people in Africa, a lot of peoples. And he ran a very, very repressive government. Haile Selassie was regarded as a living god during his time by various peoples.
But that got punctured a bit when he was successfully killed in his own bed.
When he was killed in his own bed. But he had a sort of reign of terror style, ruling style toward certainly in the latter half of his rule. And so it's a situation even now that there would be people listening to the show who would recoil at hearing, the degradations at the hands of Haile Selassie. But he was very repressive of different ethnic groups, people in the north in particular, and these different groups started to rebel against his rule during the 60s and 70s. The Tigray people and the Eritreans sort of formed separatist groups, and this was during a period when Marxist revolution was Marxism was a sort of framework that revolutionary organizations gravitated towards. There aren't a ton of capitalist revolution groups typically. You don't see
the young Republicans out.
You don't see that as often
taking over Gabon.
So the Eritreans and the Tigrayans had sort of Marxist pretensions, and they were supported by the Soviet Union, that was very interested in destabilizing autocratic governments, fomenting Marxist revolutions throughout Africa. This was a period where that Africa was a major stage in the kind of global battle for.
The risk board didn't look good for them.
That's right.
Like, they were very excited about Angola because they hadn't had a lot of anything good since Cuba.
That's right. And there's so much opportunity in Africa. We see it now in that the Chinese are sort of pouring money and they don't have a ton of there isn't the same sort of global risk battle happening. And so the energy that China is pouring into Africa, and in fact Ethiopia, isn't being really matched by any countervailing ideology.
They're going to have very strategic. I mean, China's putting in military bases on the Red Sea.
Yeah, when I was in Ethiopia a couple of years ago, they were the Chinese were building a whole railroad out to the ocean.
Thank you.
On behalf of Ethiopia, very generously.
Well, if they'd had better transportation in the 80s, they wouldn't have had some of the instability and last mile problems that led to the famines. The famines were intensified by the political situation. Right?
Well, not just intensified. So in 1975, Haile Selassie was deposed and murdered, and in his place, a government called the Derg, which was D-E-R-G, Derg.
The Derg?
The Derg, which
it's like something from Frank Herbert's Dune.
I know. It's shorthand for the Provisional Military Government of Socialist Ethiopia.
It's an acronym.
Yeah.
It's like FARC or whatever.
And we're talking about Amharic, so it's very hard to translate directly what their acronyms might be. But they were a socialist, Marxist junta that took over, and like a lot of Marxist juntas, now I'm not somebody that's always going to come out against the latest Marxist junta, but one of the things, and we've talked...
You could switch to junta. Then you sound muy auténtico.
Oh, junta.
Junta. Oh, speak Spanish to me again,
Come
Judd.
on, speak Spanish. As is common, I think, and we've talked about this quite a few different times in the backyard blast furnaces. It's not uncommon to initiate, for a Marxist group newly in power, to initiate reforms. And those reforms often take the form of land reform.
Centralization of the...
That's right. And Ethiopia is largely an agricultural economy, right? A vast majority of the economy is agriculture. They're not making cars. They are generating produce and livestock.
Delicious flatbread and Dora Watan injera.
Right. And the Derg had a better idea, and they started moving, changing the agricultural quotas, changing the sort of rural arrangement. And a lot of that was because although the Derg had deposed Haile Selassie, they were still being opposed by different Marxist revolutionary groups within Ethiopia, specifically the Tigray and the Eritreans in the form of the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
I like how there's a Marxist group for each minority.
And the Eritrean Liberation Front and the Eritrean People's Liberation Front.
They sound fake.
Among many, many others.
They sound like punchlines from a 70s movie. Faye Dunaway is here from the Eritrean People's Liberation Front.
And all these different Marxist organizations did not trust the Derg. They didn't feel that the Derg represented very well the various other peoples of Ethiopia.
Not me. I love the Derg.
And
Gotta hand it to the Derg.
the Eritreans were fighting for independence. The Tigrayans were also. I mean, Ethiopia was on the verge of being rent asunder, and so the Derg, in addition to instituting all these agricultural reforms and social reforms, they were doing those things also as a component of the Civil War, trying to deny food to their enemies in the north, trying to control the distribution of food, but also sort of using foreign aid as a component in waging war.
Yeah, the money was not going to the actual hungry people.
Right, saving, reserving aid or directing it this and thus.
I remember being shocked at that kind of counterintuitive hot take in the 1980s when the only thing anyone knew about Ethiopia was that they were starving. And the answer was, actually, man, there's plenty of food. It's the corrupt bureaucracy and developing world, mind blower. You couldn't just give them food. It wouldn't help.
Well, it was a mind blower. And from 1975 to 1977, there was a period of that was called the Red Terror, where, just as the name suggests, it was not a fun time to be really anyone in Ethiopia. This region still, although Ethiopia now is a very stable country, the Somalia to its south and Sudan to its north. I mean, it's still an area where the political situation hasn't calmed completely down. In fact, Somalia tried to invade Ethiopia during this Red Terror period. It was a pretty rough time, and so instituting land reform, it didn't, even if you ascribe noble intentions to most Marxist land reform, which I would hesitate to do, this was even more like a wing of a kind of military strategy or a self-preservation strategy.
Nobody actually thought it was time to industrialize Ethiopia.
Right.
They knew what they were doing.
And so by the early 80s, there began to be signs of famine in Ethiopia. And that famine was kind of restricted to areas under the control of the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. People in the south that were under Derg control, the Derg had assured that the agricultural produce was sort of siphoned off and was feeding the people with in their
right
area of
people,
influence. Yeah. There was a lot of controversy about the sort of European NGOs that were under Derg control. There was forced resettlement happening, and this was all in the early 80s, prior to any later sign of drought, which
the food shortages predated the meteorological stuff.
Yeah, there was still plenty of food being grown in Ethiopia when signs of famine first arose. But this is all being played out in the British news media, and Bob Geldof from the Boomtown Rats is a part of this sort of late 70s, early 80s activist music community, and he sees an opportunity to support the poor in Africa.
The imagery was shocking.
It's
the kids with the flies and the swollen stomachs. It was inescapable.
Famine is terrible 80s. To consider, and the Derg made a real point to propagandize the famine and to describe it as the result of meteorological factors and to not divorce it from the war, but to make it seem like it was a product of the revolutionaries rather than of the central government.
Well, because they knew the influx of foreign aid would help prop up their regime, I assume.
Well, and the influx of sympathy, right? There were competing groups vying for international sympathy, and if your government is if your if your military supplies are coming from the Soviet Union and it's part of a geopolitical chess game, these sort of cynically, the optics of it become part of that. At one point, the military was funded by 46% of the gross national product, and like human aid relief and stuff was from 5%.
That might seem low to future listeners, especially if they're future Americans. I don't know.
So Geldof organized what became known as Band-Aid, and that was a super group, as you love to. And I think Band-Aid probably has to be in your list of top 5 super groups, right?
No, I dislike that song. My kids make us listen to Christmas radio stations all December.
And you don't like it.
They play Do They Know It's Christmas so much.
So
if I ever liked that song, it's been wrung out of me by Warm 106.5.
The song Do They Know It's Christmas? It's often commented upon that Ethiopia is largely a Christian nation.
Yeah, the majority of Ethiopia is some kind of Orthodox Coptic Christianity, right? They totally know it's Christmas.
They know of Christmas, although the Ethiopian Orthodox Church celebrates Christmas on the 7th of January.
Oh. So not only do they know it's Christmas, they know more than Bob Geldof does when it's Ethiopian Christmas.
Yeah, they knew a lot about Christmas, and because their church is very, very old, they could make a fairly reasonable claim that they knew better when Christmas was.
More than some Irish Catholic guy.
So that's always I think struck a lot of people as a weird question to ask. Do they know it's Christmas? But the impulse was, I think, that seeing the starving children on TV, who were completely isolated, completely out of touch from the wider world, it wasn't that they didn't know what Christmas was, but that they wouldn't even know what time it was, what year it was. Completely isolated, unable to have access to.
I think it needs a little rewrite. So you're not implying that their ignorance is the root of the problem.
Right. It's a little tricky. Maybe the Advent calendars had been lost, but it was a fairly interesting idea that Geldof had to put together all of his sort of leftist friends. The Boomtown Rats weren't like as big as U2, but he was a connector, right? Geldof had a lot of friends.
Well, you can tell by looking at you can see who's in his Rolodex by looking at the video.
And he got Sting, and he got a lot of popular.
George Michael of Wham. Mm-hmm. Isn't Bono's on it, isn't he?
Bono's there, and they recorded this song, which was even in 1984. It sort of felt vaguely colonialist. It was like, as you were saying, kind of condescending, but it had a good beat and you could dance to it, and it rocketed up the charts, and raised quite a bit of money for African relief. Now, as we see, that money, quite a bit of it went to Ethiopia and was siphoned off by the various revolutionary groups and used to either fund the Derg.
So they're shooting shells at the Eritreans with Bob Geldof's picture on it, basically.
Yeah, right. I mean, a lot of it went down there just as raw materials, but a lot of it went just as cash. The money that fell into the hands of the Tigray People's Liberation Front also used as much for bullets as for food. And then, tragically, there genuinely was a drought, a severe drought, in Eastern Africa for the next 2 years, 1983 to 85. There was a catastrophic drought, and it compounded the effects of this land reform and the war between these different Marxist groups, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people died. As many as 8 million people were affected by the famine. Millions of people were actually being fed with relief food. So the world did respond, and NGOs did pour food aid into Africa, enough that it kept millions of people alive. But by some estimates, over 1 million people died of starvation. Other estimates put that as at a slightly lower number, but none less than hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people died. So this became the Band-Aid and Do They Know It's Christmas, however sort of misguided the tone of the tune.
Because people aren't buying it because they love the lyrics. Like a lot of the reason for those high sales is because people are like, let's all do our part, and I'll buy this single I never normally buy.
Yeah, and everybody likes to hear Sting. When Sting's voice rings out over your speakers, it's just like, empty my pockets.
It just brightens my day. Every little thing he does is magic.
But it did direct a lot of attention and a lot of energy, and it funneled a lot of money to relieving this desperate situation. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of oversight about the situation. And as you were saying, the story that was told at the time did not really describe the conditions that it described. I mean, it's one thing to show people dying of starvation. It's another thing to zoom that lens out a little bit and show like warring groups that are fighting over territory, that are imposing economic systems that on a country that was already struggling, and it was a very sort of Stalin in Ukraine situation where the famine was, it played a strategic role. Millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people were dying, and not all of those. Was it just God?
I've noticed that there's some legacy of this for people our age, I think, whereby the kind of the smart in the know thing to say is that, you can't throw money at problems like this. Like I see this often when, from people who think there should be a rebuttal to Bill Gates style philanthropy. I do hear a lot of people saying, it's not like you could solve these problems with money. And, Bill Gates actually is, eradicating diseases from whole nations by throwing large amounts of money strategically at it. But I think there is some kind of leftover Ethiopian famine hot take that I often hear from certain cynical quarters like, you've got to do something better with the money than that. You can't just throw it at the poorest people. What a waste.
And there's another component of that that we'll see in a second. But here, just to give you a sense of the super group that did Do They Know It's Christmas, I'll read you a couple of names here.
I was looking at the list. There's only, the number of Americans is tiny. It's Jody Watley and Kool and the Gang, and that's it, I think, for the U.S.
That's right, Kool and the Gang. But from the British side, we've got Bono and Adam Clayton. Phil Collins is there.
Makes you wonder what Larry and the Edge were doing.
Boy George flew in just to do he flew in from America on the Concorde just to sing his part.
What a hero.
Simon Le Bon, George Michael, as you said.
It's all of Duran Duran, it looks like.
Paul McCartney did a spoken word thing.
It must have been people who couldn't be there. Like Bowie and McCartney must have recorded something after the fact.
Everybody from Duran Duran, Sting. So
Phil Collins plays drums. I don't know if you said that.
And it went to number 1 all around the world. Mm-hmm. And over in the United States of good old America, it similarly inspired people. And it wasn't just the famine in Africa, but also watching our British pop friends put together this kind of, at the time, sort of unprecedented collective effort. And one of the things that was astonishing about it was you think of musicians, pop musicians, as having somewhat competitive relationships with one another. All these people are their singles are knocking one another off the charts. You don't normally see them except in an award ceremony context, and especially not collaborating on a thing. So during the MTV years, where now we had a picture of all these people. We'd seen Boy George and Cyndi Lauper. We thought of them as adjacent to one another because we watched their videos one after another. But here they all were in the same room. It was very exciting.
And there is some kind of weird sense of, you're getting a peek behind the curtain like we still like it when we see actors joshing each other at award shows. You're like, oh my gosh, what a good sport. Or they show up on SNL,
right?
And we're like, tee-hee.
Yeah,
look at famous
amazing
people clowning around. Like, really, we should expect that these people can all get in a room and
right,
and smile.
They all sniff the
for a
same
couple
cocaine.
hours.
They're not
Exactly.
They're not alien to one another.
Do you know what I really enjoy, John?
What do you enjoy, Ken?
I enjoy these addenda entries we've been recording.
Yeah, we just got done.
Omnibus.
We just got done doing an addenda, and it really, they really stand on their own.
It's fun because we have managed to create this group of thousands of people who just do the work for us.
Mm-hmm. They all have things they want to add to
They
our
all
shows.
have fun, interesting expertise and stories, and you want to talk back to the podcast, and of course you can't, or you'll look like an idiot on the train. But now they can. They're suggesting their own material, and in the addenda episode, we can share those to an audience in this time period and beyond.
Sometimes we argue with them, but most of the time their additions are relevant and quite interesting.
And we're certainly respectful.
That's right. Well, yeah, mostly.
Mostly.
But they lead us to sometimes go off on a different aspect of an episode we've done.
Yeah, they're kind of freewheeling in a way that, with Omnibus, we're usually trying to get back to the story because we're trying to, finish educating the future on whatever happened to this French foreign minister or whatever.
Right.
And here, we can just say whatever, and we can just start randomly Googling facts. You wanted to know how long a $5 bill lasted, so we looked it up.
5 years.
4.9 years or something.
But these are available only to people who subscribe to our Patreon, which involves some sort of contribution to the production of the show.
Yes, we have multiple tiers, and at any tier from $5 up, which would be all the tiers, you get immediate access at the end of every month to a new addenda episode, some of which are like getting up to an hour in length.
That's right.
How long was that last one? Was it close to an hour?
Yeah, it was 50 minutes, I think, worth of us going from episode to episode and kind of dealing with our viewer mail.
So a whole new, really a regular-sized bonus omnibus entry every month if you have the resources and choose to support the show. And
at different tiers of our Patreon, you have other benefits, right? Name some benefits at different tiers.
At the $10 tier, you get access to as well as the addenda episode, you get access to our image feed where we post show notes, funny things people have sent us, you and I clowning around.
Our show notes are hilarious.
They're illegible.
Right.
But let's not downplay how good they are, since we do want people to donate.
But there are tons of goofs. Right now I'm sitting here with the Jeopardy trophy greatest of all time. It's sitting for some reason over here on my side of the desk.
For some reason.
And on top of it, it has a little statue of a Basque or Catalonian boy taking a poop. Now, you're not going to know what that symbolizes, what that comes from, unless you're a subscriber. And this is a photograph that we'll post on our image feed.
At the $20 tier, you get a signed copy of one of our show notes. I'm going to make you, I have brought a Sharpie, and I'm going to make you sign those today.
Oh, we're going to send them to people in the mail.
Yes, we are sending them out worldwide.
Wow, how exciting.
For them.
Yeah.
And for you, if you like signing things.
I like signing things.
For $50, these high tiers are very aspirational.
Sure, they're specific to people that have a little bit more money to share.
Well, and they're specific to people who could just as easily hear the show for free, but enjoy the feeling of support and community, I guess.
Right.
At the $50 level, you get to choose a show topic that goes to the top of our heap. And we just got our first request today from Krista, who has 2 ideas that she'd like us to do.
I'm excited to hear them.
And at the $100 level, John and I will actually come to your house and do some chores.
Yeah, that's right. I will be a human Roomba.
We will
put me in a closet, and
we will actually do a video chat.
Yeah.
At the $100 level.
That's a lot of money, though.
It really, I don't see, on no level is that worth it. Again, it's just about the feeling of,
I don't know,
of support and community that people feel.
A video chat with somebody? It's probably going to be MC Hammer's kids or somebody that we're going to talk to.
Where would they get the money?
Oh, oof. Ouch. MC Hammer burn. But in the U.S., no less a person than Harry Belafonte, who was a generation older than the rest of these pop stars, a man of the sort of, calypso jazz scene of the...
Turned civil rights leader, right?
And then became a very activist civil rights leader. Yeah. He'd been concerned about the situation in Africa for a long time and had been trying to conceive of a way to get an American response to put together aid from the entertainment side of American business and directed at Africa. And so when he saw, he'd already been working on this project, and when he saw what happened with Band-Aid, he went to his group of associates and said, can't we do this in the United States? And he contacted a man by the name of Ken Cragen, because Ken was Lionel Richie's manager. And Harry Belafonte felt like Lionel Richie was, at that point in time, a major star.
One of the biggest pop stars in terms of the charts of the time.
And someone who was very prolific as a songwriter, someone who knew a lot of people. And so Harry Belafonte wanted Lionel Richie to kind of be one of the first people he talked to about his idea. And Ken Cragen also was, and it may be Ken Cragen. Why don't we say Ken Cragen?
Let's just alternate.
Okay.
Release the Cragen.
Ken Cragen also was the manager for Kenny Rogers, who was similarly, kind of at the peak of his career.
So he only manages people who've recorded "Lady." No, wait, is that the song? Is that the song that Lionel Richie and Kenny Rogers have both done? Yes,
I think that they did it because their manager Ken Cragen put them up to it. Who knows whether they would have known each other otherwise. But Ken Cragen was a rock manager, and Harry Belafonte contacted him, and Ken said, "Hey, this is something I'd like to get involved in," and began compiling a list of musicians. He went to Quincy Jones, who was the obvious guy to sort of get on board, and so Quincy Jones then brings in Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson wants to work with Lionel Richie. They set off to write the song.
I mean, that's virtually a summit of the pop charts at the time. Like, it's pretty clear that Michael's number one, Lionel Richie's number two, as far as just unavoidable pop singles at the time.
And I think they were, it wasn't immediately clear that Michael and Lionel were going to write the song, but this was at a time when nobody said no to Michael Jackson. Stevie Wonder was...
Including 8-year-olds.
Oof. Stevie Wonder was engaged at that early point, but Stevie couldn't, drop everything and come write this song with Michael Jackson. So by all accounts, Michael and Lionel sequestered themselves immediately. And at a certain point, Lionel got up and went to get a glass of water. And when he came back, Michael Jackson had written and recorded a lot of the tune. Michael was
Don't go get a glass of water.
Prolific at that point. No, Michael never claimed the credit, and I think Lionel wrote maybe the music, but Jackson really
did. They have the title, or does Michael Jackson, do you think, come up with "We Are the World"?
That's a good question, and I wonder whether maybe the title didn't come from Lionel Richie, and then Michael fleshed it out. But so here we are. Band-Aid happened in 1984. The single was released in November of 84. And
because the UK has this, by the way, thing where you want to see which Christmas hit tops the charts.
And they were very surprised.
A thing we don't have.
They were surprised that this became as big a hit as it did.
It's the same year as Last Christmas by George Michael.
The worst of all Christmas songs.
Although I think maybe neither...
Maybe that's why we never heard Last Christmas until the last 3 years, because
George Michael sang on both the great Christmas songs of 84, and then he died on Christmas 16.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So,
it's a little tidbit.
He had a good Christmas and kind of a lousy one.
Well, so they started recording "We Are the World" in January of '85. Only, really, just a month after. Do They Know It's Christmas?
And it seems like a reaction, but you're saying it's not. They were both in the works in parallel.
No, it absolutely is a reaction. Harry Belafonte was working on his own kind of like sort of nascent project to help Africa, but inspired by Do They Know It's Christmas, they put together these people, the great, their good fortune that Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie are capable of writing songs that fast.
And I guess we should point out this probably all goes back to George's. This is Otis Wilbury's fault, right? This is Concert for Bangladesh. No, George's Nelson Wilbury, I think. Like the Concert for Bangladesh is kind of the text for rock as disaster relief benefit, right?
Right. The Concert for the People of Kampuchea.
Oh yeah.
Was the first,
is Kampuchea before Bangladesh? Yeah, I guess that's true because the Bangladesh thing is early 80s. Yeah, it's whenever the typhoon flood thing was.
The Kampuchea concert happened
79.
It was in 79, right? And that was and Paul McCartney and the Who and Queen all appeared at that, and it was organized by Paul McCartney. So of course it was.
Oh no, Bangladesh is earlier. Bangladesh is like
that's George Harrison,
yes,
right?
71, 72, yeah.
Okay,
and Ravi Shankar.
And Kampuchea was it was a series of concerts, right?
Yes. Did they actually tour? Was it like Live Aid where they did it in multiple cities?
That's a good question. It was like a festival. It was a festival that took place over the course of almost a week.
Oh yeah, they did a week in London, and then there was the movie. I've never seen the concert film.
The thing about the Concert for Kampuchea and the Concert for Bangladesh is that those are big benefit concerts where people get up and play each other's songs, like sort of Last Waltz style. And Do They Know It's Christmas is kind of the first like group that's all singing together on one song, where everybody takes a verse.
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of super group angle to the concerts for Bangladesh or Kampuchea. Maybe they all come out at the end and sing My Back Pages. I don't know.
Yeah, everybody gets up and John Lennon plays with a
ball and a cup
with like Curtis Mayfield or whatever it was that he did.
Yeah.
So the song "We Are the World," which is the product of USA for Africa, comes out in March of 1985, and is an enormous hit. And it's an enormous hit partly because it's a real earworm, partly because it's sort of sailing on this idea of the sort of the American response to the British supergroup. And in the American style, the supergroup is 100 times more super.
Right.
It has Stevie Wonder and Paul Simon, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross.
It's basically pulling from whoever can get to New York rather than London.
Right.
And that's
a lot more people. Willie Nelson, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Ray Charles. And then in the chorus, the man you were waiting for, Dan Aykroyd, Lindsey Buckingham, which surprises me, but I guess he's,
Was Stevie Nicks there?
I feel like he should have. Lindsey Buckingham. Oh, Sheila E. is there. Bob Geldof came over for it.
It's a crossover.
All of the Jacksons, Bette Midler.
It's very pan-genre for sure.
It really is.
Like
and
getting country stars in, and it really does feel like all hands on deck for famine relief.
Strangely, Paul Schaefer didn't make an appearance. It seems like the one thing of that kind that he didn't.
That was the last time he was not asked to be the band leader at something.
Anyway, We Are the World is similarly, there are some problematic lyrics to it. In particular, the wonderful line, "Tonight, thank God it's them instead of you."
Isn't that on Do They Know It's Christmas?
Is it?
I don't know. "
Tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. We are the world. Am I wrong?
No, that's what They Know It's Christmas. It's Bono's thing.
Oh,
I had to
right.
hear this 100 times over the
Right.
holidays.
You're right.
If you have any questions about Christmas singles,
Well,
I can't even think of the "We Are the World" lyrics apart from the chorus.
want to make a brighter day from gifts are given.
I mean, the lyrics are very anodyne. You don't want anything that anyone can disagree with. So it's
Right.
all about how the human race is one family.
Right. Well, and I believe that is it expresses Michael Jackson's worldview, because you do hear that
Sure.
reiterated in
Heal
his
the
music.
World, Black or
Right.
White. He's got so many of these songs.
And so it's a very, and Michael Jackson is at the peak of his power. So it's a very Michael Jackson sounding song, which you can attribute somewhat to its success. The world is primed to hear these voices do this kind of music. So it's a huge, huge, huge hit. It raises millions of dollars, and is sort of, I think, widely considered an unmitigated success. Again, the money goes to Ethiopia through a variety of foundations and NGOs, and the revolution there continues. The leader of the Derg is a man by the name of Mengistu Haile Mariam, who's a real blackguard and is continuing to suppress these revolutionary organizations. But the Eritrean People's Liberation Front and the Tigray People's Liberation Front are making real inroads in the leadership of the Derg. And so, although the famine starts to recede in 1985, the strife there in Ethiopia continues. And the desire on the part of the West to continue to help Africa now has gotten a head of steam, and the people involved don't want to let this good thing just dissipate. Geldof puts together a huge benefit concert that takes place both in England and in the United States, called Live Aid, which happens in July of '85. So this is just a few months after the release of We Are the World. Here comes Live Aid, and
that's a full year of. I wonder when the benefit fatigue kicks in. I guess maybe we'll find out.
Well, we will find out. The Live Aid again is a huge success. It reunites Queen and Led Zeppelin. It's a huge cultural moment. And after Live Aid, I imagine all these entertainers are casting about for something exciting to do. And one of the people trying to figure out what to do next is Ken Kragen, or Krogan.
We now have a benefit industrial complex.
That's right. And Ken seizes on an idea, along with Harry Belafonte,
He seizes on an idea, and he seizes on Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte seized on him.
He grabs him by the lapels.
They're grabbing one another. They're jumping for joy, and they're thinking to themselves, we have a great idea, which is, what if we formed a human chain all the way across America as a publicity event, and we would sell T-shirts and get maybe corporate sponsorship. We would raise money. People would buy their way into the human chain. And in making this chain all the way across America, people holding hands from one coast to the other, we would raise money to help people dying of starvation from a famine that now seems to have abated. It isn't a cynical ploy, I don't think, but it is a confusing one.
I was thinking that it seems like it's leveraging just my memory of the early 80s, a lot of this Guinness Book of World Records fervor. Do you remember the TV boom of that's incredible and real people and Ripley's Believe It or Not. There was a real TV boom of just amazingly scaled world record, amazing feats. And I feel like putting a chain of people across a continent really ties into that whole, it's like you're making the world's biggest omelet, but with, it's all for a great cause. So it combines the benefit angle of USA for Africa and Live Aid and Band-Aid with this kind of American sea to shining sea spectacle.
Yep.
That's on the airwaves all the time. This guy who can ride 6 bikes at once or whatever.
Yeah, it's Gump, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Gump, who is, in this case, like pitted against the Derg. It's the one time you have a Gump versus
The eternal
Derg.
struggle.
Holding hands across America, a human chain, wasn't a brand new idea either. In 1976, really? A man by the name of Marvin Rosenblum conceived of this concept and actually named it Hands Across America.
But he just told his wife, he didn't tell Harry Belafonte?
He tried to get it together. He tried to make it happen. And I think he got a section right outside of Chicago where he had 10 miles of people holding hands.
It's a good start, Marvin, but
it didn't really catch fire. And he let the copyright expire. So Harry Belafonte was conscious of it. And he and Cragen felt like they could really make this happen. And they did. They got corporate sponsorship from Coca-Cola. They promoted this idea that on one day in May in 1986, it was going to be May 25th, 1986. People across the country were going to form this unbreakable human chain and raise what Cragen thought would be $100 million for African relief.
It kind of, so I'm looking at a map, and I know you're going to go here eventually, but the problem with the line across America is that it doesn't involve most of America. Much of the country is missed by the width of much of Europe, if you live in Montana, your closest Hands Across America point is Albuquerque, New Mexico, 4 states away.
And there was a lot of complaint about it. No
kickbacks picking the route.
Well, like Ted Kennedy protested that Hands Across America didn't include Massachusetts. He was, and a lot of people were like, I can't drive 15 hours to hold hands for 15 minutes.
If Ted Kennedy is on Martha's Vineyard, you definitely don't want him driving down.
Boy, I'll tell you. But there was a big problem with the idea of a human chain, which is like, yeah, it's sure if it goes through your town, all you have to do is roll out of bed. But to get to where you can stand and hold hands with everybody,
there's also the obvious problem that there's going to be more people wanting to hold hands in, say, downtown Manhattan, than there are in eastern Arizona or southern Oklahoma.
That's right. The human chain started in Battery Park in Manhattan, and for a lot of its length on the East Coast, the chain was 6 people deep. Or it was a huge crowd of people all holding hands in an unbroken line, and it went across the George Washington Bridge and into New Jersey and down and all the way to Maryland. Was truly an unbroken chain. I think somewhere in Maryland there was a stretch where, I don't know, somebody let go of their hands.
Maryland letting down the side again.
But then it continues sort of snaking across the country. Actually, the first person in line was a little girl. A little girl by the name of Amy Sherwood, who was living in poverty in Brooklyn. And I think as Harry Belafonte thought this through, he realized that there were a lot of people who were going hungry in the United States, and he wanted it to be bigger than just a famine relief in Africa issue, and he wanted some of this money to go to people in the U.S.
Well, it does seem weird that an American-themed event is not for domestic poverty.
And so it started to expand its purview, and Amy Sherwood sort of represented I guess what was there as a hungry American to
like
be
when you
the
say
first.
she was the first one there, you mean she's the first longitudinally?
The first longitudinally. She had 1 foot in the East River and one and a hand holding the first the next person in line. there were a lot of celebrities that wanted to get involved. And at every state and every city, there were some celebrity hosts. I'm sure some people that you're a pretty big fan of. Do you have a list of them over there?
I am looking at a list. I'm delighted that in Toledo, Ohio, the big star was Jamie Farr, who played Toledo resident Max Klinger on MASH.
That's right.
So even the non-big cities got somebody in. They imported somebody. Like Cincinnati got Chewbacca, for example.
Yeah, the Chewbacca. That's right.
The real Chewbacca? Who
and
can say?
I think that R2-D2 appeared at some point.
He doesn't have hands.
C-3PO did.
R2 doesn't have hands.
Well, the thing is, he has those little boxes that you say they come up, zzz, little things that come out. You could grab a hold of R2-D2.
So it's hands and
bits, other bits.
And USB ports
I'm
across
sure
America?
that there were people in line who also had lost a hand or maybe both hands. So it wasn't, you couldn't restrict it just to people with hands.
That's true. It's ableist.
Anyway, it snaked all the way across the country and largely achieved its goal. In the desert Southwest, there were large places where there were gaps in the chain, just because, as you say, there were plenty of people in Montana that would have filled those gaps if they could have gotten there. But people did a pretty good job of trying to fake it, right? They would hold ribbons and separate themselves, by the length of a ribbon. At one point, there was a story that there was a Greyhound bus driving along, and the driver saw a big section that didn't have anybody in it. He stopped the bus and asked everybody on the bus to get out and fill the gap.
Couldn't they just have the Rajneeshi bring in, a bunch of homeless people?
They should have done.
Have them fill the.
They were all up in
gaps?
Oregon.
Yeah, they were busy.
There was quite a bit of controversy. In fact, the line actually went in one of the gates of the White House up onto the steps of the portico, where Ron and Nancy stepped out and joined hands, and then went down the other side and out the gate. And there were a lot of people that objected to Reagan being in Hands Across America because his policies were precisely the ones that were defunding.
It was all a long con. Amy Sherman at that point grabs an electrode sitting in Battery Park. Battery Park's a literal battery in this example, and it just zaps all the way up the chain.
Right. Kills 200,000 people.
Jamie Farr. It's all worth it. Chewbacca. It's all worth it.
Weirdly, one of the things that complexified Hands Across America was that on that same day, Bob Geldof had put together a global fun run called Sport Aid, where
he has a competing event?
People were running 10K races in major capitals all across Europe. A Sudanese cross-country runner by the name of Omar Khalifa took a torch, lit it in Africa, carried that torch to Athens, combined it with the Olympic torch, which had never been lit outside of the Olympics.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's 86.
This was the only time that an Olympic torch was ever lit outside of the context of the Olympics. And then Khalifa grabbed the torch and ran from Athens through all the capitals of Europe. And this event was also happening in the United States. Like massive sort of collected fun runs or 10K races to raise money for Africa under the aegis of Sport Aid.
So this is a coordinated effort. Bob Geldof's not trying to use Sport Aid to...
It was a coordinated effort, but they hadn't coordinated it with Hands Across America.
It was just a coincidence?
It's just a coincidence,
realized?
And they were drawing from one another's audience. No one in America knows about Sport Aid, although it was a big deal elsewhere.
I thought Sport Aid had electrolytes in it.
Because that's ADE.
Right. Right, because we were busy swaying with Ed Begley Jr.
That's right. Hands Across America also tried to have a song that rocketed up the charts.
I can still hear the song.
But the problem is the song, first of all, was written by Toto or performed by Toto. And second of all, Toto was they were the only supergroup involved. No one else was in. They didn't figure out a way to get
Toto doesn't count as a supergroup.
No.
It has all the members of Toto.
But like for some reason, Hands Across America, a song that you can sing.
Hands across this blessed land or something.
It didn't.
Hands across America.
They didn't do the supergroup thing. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why.
Like they've got musicians in the line. Just mic them up. Michael Jackson was standing there in Gary, Indiana, or wherever, Youngstown, Ohio. It turns out.
That's right. Somehow, when Ken Cragen was putting it all together, he forgot the key component of having all these celebrities,
which was call Kenny and Lionel and
them to sing.
Yeah.
Well, in the end, Mengistu Haile Mariam and his Derg were finally ousted.
As a result of Hands Across America?
Well, it's unclear. But the Tigray People's Liberation Front, in coordination with the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, and I think maybe more importantly, maybe not coincidentally, the result of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the sudden evaporation of all of that.
That's all their funding.
Material aid. The Derg were deposed and a new government was put in place in the form of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front.
Love the EPRDF.
And Eritrea broke off from Ethiopia and formed its own country. And for the most part, peace reigns in the valley. The Tigray now, although they were an ethnic minority, they were able to form a stable parliamentary government in Ethiopia, and really have, at least within the context of Ethiopia and Eritrea, there haven't really been any subsequent famines.
Bob Geldof did it. And that concludes Hands Across America. Entry 565.PR1121, certificate number 26004, in the omnibus. Now, listeners, you are no doubt living in a famine-stricken terror land of your own, with no pop stars to come to your aid. But you should know that if you somehow have access to the internet of our era, you can find us at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick, on social media at Omnibus Project jointly. You could have found us on email in our era at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. We received mail, physical mail, at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. In fact, John, speaking of Africa, we received this lovely Ghanaian smock. Is it Ghanaian? Is that the demonym for Ghana?
Ghanaian.
Ghanaian? From a listener.
Look at that. That's a really gorgeous thing. Unfurl that.
Who just returned from a 2-year stint with the Peace Corps. And I guess he was inspired by us covering the Twins of Benin in a neighboring region to send us. It's made of these long strips of hand-woven
it's like bark cloth almost. How big is it? Which of us will it fit?
It would probably fit both of us at once.
Well, it seems like it's wide but short.
It's like a Cosby sweater.
So wide like me, short like you.
Yeah, I think you would need to wear pants with it. It's not a...
put it on.
It's not a onesie.
Let's see it.
Is this appropriation if I put this on?
I don't think so. No, nobody's... I'm just going to describe it.
I've been doing the show in a daishiki for years, and nobody said boo.
Okay. Looks good so far. It kind of looks like a little bit of a
It
prairie dress.
seems like it has armholes. Yeah, it does.
It does.
There we go.
Okay, I see. Stand up. Let me see it. It's blousy.
It goes about to my butt.
It's nice.
It's definitely something you wear. But yeah, it's got these kind of big blousy sleeves.
It's a very attractive garment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can take no credit for it.
It gives you a little bit of a Courtney Love sort of baby doll look. Because it's
Baby Spice kind of a thing?
Yeah, much bigger than you and short, high-waisted.
Oh yeah, and look at it in the back. Like it really blossoms out there. If I could have a little more junk in the trunk.
Yeah, I
feel like
it either a tsetse fly can get in or a tsetse fly would be chased out. I'm not sure what that garment's relationship to tsetse flies is.
Well, you can definitely. Are you going to ever wear this?
Well, let's see.
Do you want to look Ghanaian?
Well, I'll try it on.
Do you want to put it on?
No. I'll try it. I'll try it on after the show.
All right. So yeah, you can send us any artifacts of your choosing. It doesn't have to be a dashiki, but apparently now I have one and John doesn't. So he's going to be very sad every time I do the show wearing my new Ghanaian smock. Listeners, if you would like to congregate with other listeners of the Omnibus, there's the Futurelings Facebook page and the Futurelings subreddit, where a lot of good times are happening, and mostly people are complaining about John's knowledge of two-stroke power mowers.
Oh, they don't know anything.
They don't know anything. Stay far away.
The only people that are complaining are, well, I'm not going to get into it. We'll talk about it in our addenda episode.
That's right. Speaking of addenda episodes, we now do a monthly bonus show for supporters of the program. You can show your support at patreon.com/omnibus project.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, when we still had a connection to a time when people would, in America or in Europe, would feel enough of a common cause that they could put together this kind of strange collective effort. Can you imagine?
Really ambitious, too.
Yeah.
Like 3,000 miles of infrastructure.
Can you imagine someone thinking today that they could get everyone in America behind some initiative? I mean, if you were to say, let's feed the people in Africa now, fully 50% of the people in America would say, let them die.
Well, yeah, you've got the kind of pushback I was talking about. Like, no, that's not how we solve these problems.
Right.
We need to give them microfinance and make them entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
you can't
right.
just give them food.
But to imagine that this wasn't even the product of a big multinational corporation, but like one sort of mid-level Hollywood manager and
right.
And what would have
just
even
one guy at CAA or something.
Yeah, and a guy that was 65 years old that was famous for calypso music, and a guy from the Boomtown Rats, a band that nobody really liked that much, and yet they did all these amazing things. The problem, of course, with Hands Across America is it raised something like $35 million, but $20 million of it went to administration costs.
Well, yeah, you're administrating. You've got this thing in 100 cities,
right?
You know, it's like running a political campaign in 50 states.
So these days, I mean, $15 million is sort of a line item for Bill Gates. So maybe the economics have changed, but amazing to think, Futurelings, that maybe Ken and I are just living in a period where these things seem impossible, and you, because you are a sentient aspen, are always holding hands across America.
Well, you'd have to get a line of aspen through some pretty aspen-unfriendly parts of the country, wouldn't you?
Well, but maybe hyper-evolved aspen can live in places that are hot and dry. Or it could be roots across America where it's all different plants. And so you've got your...
There probably is some.
Cacti.
I bet you could connect root tissue from coast to coast.
From one end to the other? Well, yeah, where would it... I mean, I guess you'd get to the rivers, but then there's surely mossy gunk under the rivers whose roots intermingle at the shore.
It's true. We need that mossy gunk, or we're going to get broken at the mighty Mississippi.
Mossy gunk, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived, but we hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, in the form of one continuous line of gunk, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.